Hello and welcome to yet another episode of The Week That Really Was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan for this St. Patrick's Day weekend, the week ending Friday the 15th of March. It's the week after the government's thumping referendum defeat and the politicians have all escaped the country. We'll talk about some of the things they've been saying in a few minutes, but first, hello, co-host Sarah, how are you? And what did you go up to this week?
I'm good. I'm still basking in the glory and the enjoyment of a massive no vote. So that's been fun. But apart from that, I'm good. But getting straight into it, it's been all over the news the last couple of weeks, or the last couple of days in particular. I rang my dad when I was leaving, and I said later that day it started to break on the news. I was on Mount Street, and I've parked off Mount Street for a number of years, going into Holles Street when was having babies, but I haven't been in there in a long time. And John, I was stunned at how bad the state of Mount Street and the surrounding side streets and alleyways are, with tents and rubbish and people and canopies over tents. And I'd seen pictures, like you'd sometimes see a picture of a few tents or something on Twitter, and I thought, oh, that looks terrible. But when you actually go down there and you walk up and down onto Mount Street proper, like on main Mount Street, in front, all down the street in front of the IPO offices is just tent after tent after tent, down the streets, the side streets, rubbish. The place is like, and then the side of the IPO office has queues and queues and queues of people, just lines of people, suitcases. It's like something from a movie. I just I couldn't believe it. And there was nothing about it that this was Tuesday morning. And then that afternoon, Aon O'Riordan started doing a video, and then it was on the news that night. So I don't know if they're listening to my phone calls to my dad or what, but I was shocked, and it takes a lot to shock me.
Well, I haven't been, but I sent Ben down, I think it was on Thursday, to take a look. I sent Ben down. It's not like I command him, but I suggested that he go down because he was in town anyway, and he did a video from there. And I heard from several people during the week that, I mean, it is utterly appalling. We do have a lot of listeners who don't live in Dublin, and they mightn't be familiar with the area that we're talking about, but it's not a bad area of the city. It's in fact, it will be one of the most prestigious areas of the city to have an office in, I think. Fianna Fáil headquarters is around the corner. Fine Gael headquarters is up the road. Lots of major law firms within stone's throw distance. Holles Street Hospital. This is like old Georgian Dublin we're talking about. And it's essentially been turned into a slum.
Yeah.
Is that too strong a word? You were there, I wasn't. But
No, it's not. I mean, it's just a glaring demonstration of the fact that our policies have failed. This is not working. I mean, like some of those people who are living in those tents will be there for months. It's a terrible indictment of what we're doing. And it's in the news. Okay, fine. It's in the news the last couple of days, but all we hear about is that if you say anything about immigration or about Ireland or about, question about what's happening to these people, you're racist. But I think it's pretty racist to have people arriving here seeking asylum and to put them in a tent in the street in the rain, because you're not offering them anything.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because like first and foremost, I mean, you and I are of that age now where we, particularly people who think like you and me, we have spent the last 15 years, maybe 20, maybe even 25, being lectured to about how much more compassionate this country must become, and what a cruel hellhole it used to be, and what a cold place it used to be for people, and how awful and unwelcoming and bitter it was, and how people used to look out from behind their curtains at the whores walking down the street who had sex outside marriage, and it was a terrible place to live. We didn't have this. This is the fruit of progressive Ireland. You literally got people coming from terrible situations, living in tents on the streets in the centre of Dublin as a result of the two oldest parties in the state deciding that this was the compassionate thing to do. I mean, give me a break. And then they're off to the United States to lecture the Americans. I mean, I think the first thing to say is that, not only do we have the state involved, but we have so many housing charities, so many. I mean, Matt Tracy did a piece for Gript last year about the amount of funding that the housing organisations in Dublin get to help with homelessness, and it's eye-watering sums. And yet, this is allowed to happen because, literally, I was interviewed by Virgin Media during the week for a documentary they're doing on immigration, and they were asking me about the popularity of slogans like "Ireland is full," and I was saying that if you the reason that slogan is popular is because it's not a political statement but a mathematical one, which is proven by the 10th city. I mean, you can't look at that and say those people don't have a point. It's just there are no words. I feel like I'm rabbiting on without saying anything because all I can really have here. I like to think I'm a reasonably intelligent person, but the only thing I have is anger about this. I don't have a solution because they've used up all the solutions. They've commandeered all the hotels. They've commandeered all the old nursing homes. They've filled the country with people, and this is the result of it. I often on Twitter you get people saying they're all traitors and they should be in prison. I think that's ugly rhetoric, but God, I understand it. I understand where that anger is coming from when you see things like this.
I mean, there's different things at play here for me. I mean, I felt in the last week since the referendum that there's a kind of a, and I'm sure this will resonate with a lot of people who listen to this podcast because I've seen their messages or people who know me who listen to this podcast have said it to me, that there's been a kind of a suite of beliefs of which I have, and I'm was in a member of Fianna Fáil up until 10 or 11 years ago or whatever it is, 10 years ago. And there's a suite of beliefs that I have that people who are now in Fianna Fáil would have referred to me and to my face as right wing and, I'm this and I'm that and whatever. And I feel like in the last few days that there's a couple of things that have arisen that we're going to talk about on this podcast and the referendum and this, which is that ultimately I've taken a raft of shit from people for 10 years for being a right winger and a this and a that. I was told I was bordering on racist for asking questions about people arriving in the airport with no passport and how is that happening or whatever. That was racist. Asking about what was being done, whether there was going to be limitations on people coming once we reached capacity of housing, that was racist. Now we have people living on tents, and I see all these politicians and frankly scurrying up to Mount Street to film themselves talking about this, that and the other and how this is a failed. These are the people who called anyone who asked questions, people who protested in the North Inner City about refugees being housed there, racist. Though let's call it what it is, racist. It's the same with the trans thing. You're transphobic. And I think that the referendum and a few other things that I've taken a raft of shit on a number of issues for 10 years, but I'm sorry if I sound like a bit of an arsehole for saying this, but I was right.
Yeah.
There is a problem with our immigration policy. It isn't working. The policies that the government have done don't work. It's undignified and inhumane to have people living on tents on the street for months at a time because you don't have anywhere to house them. As I've said before, if I said to you I was going to foster 15 children, but I was going to put them in the garden, you wouldn't say I was a beacon of moral superiority. You'd say I was a horrible person. This is the same thing. If you don't have the facilities for these people, it is inhumane and wrong to do what you're doing, even if you do get your moral superiority kicks from it.
Yeah.
So for 10 years or 2 years or whatever it's been racist to ask these questions. But once again, we see government and TDs scurrying in now at the last minute to say, well, this is wrong and we should be doing this and we should be doing that. No, you called everyone racist who asked about this 2 years ago. You literally called everyone racist. You said that far right elements were infiltrating into the protests and it was terrible. You never were called to account on the policies you brought in. You never admitted there might be a problem. You never said anything about anything to do with tents. And I saw it with my own eyes this week. Another disgrace by the government. And now all of a sudden, there might be a bit of a problem. Well,
yeah, my favorite line is in some of the reports this week was the very diplomatically phrased, there's a noxious smell in the area. I mean, We literally have people with nowhere to go to the bathroom who are,
Well, I didn't even want to mention. I didn't want to mention that bit because it's just gross.
But it's dehumanizing. It's look.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have the words to express how I feel about the political class of people running this country, and I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but like it's the electorate's fault. You put these idiots in power. They are as. I got an email last week, by the way, about my use of the F word, because remember in last week's episode I finally snapped and went full, not as Father Dougal says, not feck, the other F word, and I got at least one email suggesting that we shouldn't have done that, and I understand it, but sometimes it's the only word that'll do when you're talking about these fecking idiots, because I mean, as you say, it's the hypocrisy of pretending that this was everyone's fault for pointing out the problem rather than your fault for causing it. And now I don't know what you do. I mean, the first thing I don't understand is why and I mean, I don't want to sound dramatic because I don't mean for tourists or people coming in, but why effectively the border hasn't been sealed already to say, we're in this situation, we cannot take any more people, therefore you go home. Like, that is step one. And you know what they'll say? Oh, well, European law. I mean, to hell with European law. Pay the fines. This is ultimately about the ability of the rest of us to live in this country. Do what needs to be done. Worry about dealing with the European legal consequences at a later stage. But they haven't the vision to even contemplate that. I mean, it's gotten to the stage where these people are now telling us that we have to put up with these kind of scenes in our city centre, in our capital city centre, because the Europeans, who get the blame for everything bad, while our politicians take the credit for everything good, by the way, would frown on us if we were to say, well, we can't take any more people. That is nonsense in the first place. And then they'll turn around and call themselves pro-European, by the way, while blaming the European Union for all the problems in the country. I mean, this is how the Brits ended up with Brexit. I feel like I'm not even being particularly coherent this week because that topic just bothers me so much. Meanwhile, the good news is that we got another lecture from the Taoiseach, who went to Washington to tell us all that St. Patrick at the end of the day was a migrant, and he came here as a migrant and brought us loads of good things. So we should all think carefully on that. I nearly put my fist through the computer screen when I read that.
Did he live on a tent on Mount Street?
It's not clear. I mean, I guess that's where he'd be today, right? In a tent on Mount Street. But you know what struck me about that was that he said it in New York. And I got the distinct feeling that Leo Varadkar was delighted to be out of the country this week. And I got the distinct feeling that when he got to a dinner of like-minded liberals in New York City, progressives, Hillary Clinton voters, Barack Obama voters, horrified by the prospect of Donald Trump, good, New York Times reading people who, if they were in Ireland, would be writing letters to the Irish Times every week. He let it all out because he was essentially saying these people at home are going to go this weekend and they're going to celebrate St. Patrick, and they're not even going to realize, the idiots, that he was a migrant too, while they're concerned about immigration. This is what I'm putting up with at home. That was the tone, I think, in which he was speaking. And somebody will say I'm being unfair to him. I don't think I am, because I know Leo Varadkar. I've known him for years. We were in college at the same time, met him on innumerable occasions. I know the way his mind works. And I'm fairly certain that Leo...
I'm surprised. I'm surprised he didn't say, and guys, I told them what way to vote last week and they didn't do it. You see what I have to put up with?
Yeah, there was like, for him to do... I mean, first of all, it's stupid. Yes, everybody in Ireland who knows the story of St. Patrick knows that he came here from Wales as a slave, by the way, not voluntarily, didn't rock up on a dinghy and arrive with no passport into Dublin airport and say, give me asylum. He was taken here against his will, and then he came back later having had a dream that God asked him to convert the country, which he promptly did. And more power to him for that. A life well lived, as we say. But to suggest that because one person came here 1,500 years ago, the people in Ireland today have to accept every migrant in perpetuity who rocks up and lives in a tent on Mount Street, really sums up the intellectual depth of our political class, I think. And it's an argument that won't convince anybody. There's nobody in the country who has a problem with immigration last week who heard the Taoiseach saying, oh, well, St. Patrick was a migrant, and has had the scales fall from their eyes and has joined the Migrants' Rights Council.
Yeah.
It wasn't a political argument intent to change anybody's mind. It was an expression of smug we know betterism, which is
No,
the
because
default setting.
they're enlightened. They're enlightened, and we're not. That's
Um,
he knows he's enlightened, and we're not enlightened, and he's just a better person than the rest of us. And but I know people who have spent hundreds of thousands of euro to live on apartments off Mount Street. Do you think they care about St. Patrick right now? I don't.
he reminded me of myself when I was about 14. I said on Extra in the week that he was like a supercilious 14-year-old. And I confess I was thinking of myself. I remember once when I was about 14, on St. Patrick's Day, actually, my mother was trying to make me go to Mass. And I was like, it was just a Mass yesterday. It's stupid. I don't want to go again. And I remember being like, well, it's not technically a holy day of obligation. It's not a holy day of obligation in France, which it isn't. And my mother just looked at me and said, you're going to Mass. And it was that kind of attitude that like you have at that age sometimes if you're a particularly annoying teenager of, well, I know better than you, you're so stupid, that like you really would need the patience of a parent to put up with, I think.
I mean, I'm constantly reminded when you tell stories about yourself under the age of 18 that I'm glad I didn't meet you until you're about 21.
In fairness, I do it for comic. I wasn't all bad, Sarah. I wasn't all bad. Like I like dogs and things,
Yeah.
It was decent, but no. But I and I'd like to think that there were other kids who were equally as knowledge in a particular way.
I'm sure there were. I'm sure there were. But the point is that he is like a child gone over there. He tones down his rhetoric on a number of things and tones up his rhetoric on others. And yeah, I mean, I think it comes, back to your point. I'd say he's absolutely delighted to get out of Ireland because the political classes have taken a bit of a pasting this week. Would you say since the referendum? I think Michael Fitzmaurice of Independent Ireland referred to them on TV as rats in a barrel, which I found very amusing. So the fallout from the referendum, which they're trying to move on from as quickly as possible, has shown us that a number of people have now, turns out, voted no. And like statistically, I mean, apart from the ones who admitted it, there's probably a lot more.
Neeve Smith.
Actually, not statistically. Not statistically. Loads of them have told me.
Look, I can't betray confidences. But let's just say I was aware before the referendum that there was more than one Fine Gael backbencher, for example, voting no in the privacy of the ballot box. Mm-hmm. But I will say that I'm not aware of any of them having lied about it. You can probably deduce who those people were if you go back, because the people I was aware who were voting no weren't out on television saying vote yes. I mean, Neeve Smith, the chair of the Culture Committee in the Oireachtas, Fianna Fáil TD for Cavan Monaghan, basically admitted this week that she lied to her own electorate, that she asked them to vote yes and then voted no. Which, if I was a voter in Cavan Monaghan, and I was a voter in Cavan Monaghan for many, many years, I'm now a voter in Tipperary North, but I was a voter in Cavan Monaghan for many, many years, I'd be asking her, Neeve, what else are you telling us that you don't actually believe? I mean, you've just told us that you were asking us to vote one way while you were intending to vote another way yourself. I mean, that's it's lies. Like, there's no other word. I mean, often in the media and journalism, we use a phrase other than the word lies. We say misleading, or we say the statement proved to be false. This is just blatant lies. There's no other word for it. You're just admitted that you're telling lies to the voters, telling them that you, in your best judgment as their representative, they should vote yes, when in actual fact you didn't believe that at all and intended to vote the other way. I mean, in a sensible democracy, and I don't want to sound too dramatic because there are many other resigning matters, but in a normal democracy, I would have thought that would be a resigning matter. Am I overreacting?
I'm kind of torn on this one because I think people should reserve the right to change their mind, right? So, like Lisa Chambers said that she changed her mind when she read the Attorney General's advice, which she received at the same time as the rest of us from the ditch, right? So, I mean, like, I don't know Neeve Smith from Adam. I think Neeve Smith was holding meetings in her constituency about this. I think it's slightly different. I do know Lisa Chambers, and I know she's very smart, and I have a lot of time for her. I think that changing your mind and admitting that you changed your mind takes a bit of courage, but I think they've both gotten a lot of stick this week.
I think
Neeve Smith.
I think the Neeve Smith one is more egregious. I don't know why. Maybe it was just the way she phrased it, but I think it's more egregious.
Explain why.
But because she was actively calling him. Like, the only evidence I saw of Lisa Chambers advocating a yes vote was that she was handing out Fianna Fáil leaflets with yes, yes on them in the centre of Ballina or Castlebar, one of those towns in Mayo. Maybe it was Claremorris. I don't know where it was. And like, I understand that part of the job of being a politician is the party gives you a bunch of leaflets and you have to hand them out. Mm-hmm. And maybe she did that half-heartedly or whatever. But Neeve Smith was actively on the radio urging people to vote yes. Like, there's with conviction. There's a difference between half-heartedly handing somebody a leaflet. I mean, God knows anyone who's ever been in a political party has handed out a leaflet for a candidate that they didn't vote for at a convention and who they think is an idiot. That kind of stuff I understand. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm giving Lisa Chambers a break where she doesn't deserve one. But I thought the Neeve Smith one, to me, was more egregious.
I just felt like, admitting that you'd had a change of mind when you read the Attorney General's advice is different from actively campaigning on the radio and in your constituency on something, urging people to vote and then secretly going into the ballot box. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look,
neither of them covered each other. Neither of them covered themselves in glory. We'll just say that much. People make up their own mind. They don't need to hear us talking at length about it. But
But I will say that I think Lisa Chambers is smart, and I think she's a good senator, and I think that, like, okay, this isn't great, but I think that she is very, a very capable person who's probably, admitted that she had changed her mind based on the advice. And I'd rather somebody who, whether it's no matter how uncomfortable it is to admit that you changed your mind at the final hour, I'd rather that than the bunch of lemmings that we have who follow along with what Micheál says. And I think that she's competent. I think she's capable, and I don't really have anything else.
Well, I don't have anything personally against Lisa Chambers at all, and I agree with a lot of what you say. But at the end of the day, I can't consider casting a vote for any Fianna Fáil candidate at the next election as things stand, while that man remains the leader. Because
that's a separate issue. Yeah, fine. Yeah, that's a separate issue.
What really struck me this week, and Willie O'D came out. Now, it's not the first time. Willie's one of those politicians. I really like Willie O'D. I've always liked Willie. I don't know why. I just sometimes take a soft spot for politicians. Eamon O'Keefe is another person I've always had a real soft spot for, and I don't really know why. But Willie came out and he's like, Fianna Fáil has to get rid of the NGOs and the woke ideas and go back to listening to the people. And you're like, yeah, preach, Willie, preach. Thanks for listening to our podcast. Delighted to hear saying that. But then I just saw, like,
glad you finally showed up. Welcome to the far right. Take a seat.
Just don't bring that hang on. But I was just like, but who are you calling on, Willie? I mean, this, you've had the same party leader now for coming on a decade. He's mumbled his way through 3 election campaigns, delivering disaster after disaster. Your party's going nowhere. Who is actually to blame for this? It's not.
He doesn't listen to the paid up members of Fianna Fáil. He certainly doesn't listen to his parliamentary party. So, like, are you trying to get a message? Maybe you'd be better off sending a homing pigeon with him with a packet of green tea and a message on it, to be honest, because he doesn't listen to you, and well, you know it, and well, everybody else knows it. So why are you bothering? And
my other question is to Willie. We all know that Micheál is not going to change course on this. He's committed to his course of action. What are you going to do when he doesn't? I'll tell you what Willie's going to do. Willie's going to do what he always does, which is do a very good job of going around, knocking on the doors of Limerick City and saying 3 words, sure, look it. That's what Willie's going to do.
Yeah.
Sure, look it. I don't agree with everything. And, because Willie's very good at what he does, and I say this with genuine fondness, it won't be the pole-topping performance that he achieved in years past, but if he chooses to seek re-election, he'll be comfortably re-elected because enough people feel like me about Willie that sure, look it will get the job done. But sure, look it is not going to change the state of the country or the state of your political party, which is on a collision course with end of life event eventually.
But also, in the last few years of Fianna Fáil, like, I like Willie O'D too, and I have a soft spot for Willie O'D, and Willie O'D kind of makes me laugh and some of the stuff, and that's all very well. But at the same time, this kind of coming out and hand wringing, and Fianna Fáil needs to do this, and Fianna Fáil needs to do that, and but as you say, what are you going to do about it if they don't? Absolutely nothing. So shut up. I'm sorry, but like, keep it to yourself, because you're going to sit there, you're going to go to your parliamentary party meetings, you're going to do absolutely nothing. You're playing to the gallery of I don't know what there, and nobody buys it.
There'll be
Like
a bit
Mark
of whinging.
McSharry left.
There'll be a bit of whinging at the
Mark
parliamentary
McSharry left
party.
Fianna Fáil. Oh yeah, whatever. Mark McSharry left Fianna Fáil. Like, he was like, I'm not doing this, and he left. Now, people can complain and say, oh, he shouldn't have done this, he shouldn't have done that. No. Like, he said, I don't think Fianna Fáil's gone in the right direction. I don't agree with this, and this. And it got to the point, he was shouting and roaring at parliamentary party meetings. Nobody was listening to him, so he left. So don't go out into the news and do your Fianna Fáil and Sinn Féin are the only two parties that campaigned against their own base in that referendum. Don't come out now and go, oh, Fianna Fáil need to go back to basics. Yeah, we all knew that 10 years ago. Like, that's been going on for years. Fianna Fáil isn't on any better polling numbers now than they were 5 years ago. Nothing's changed. So playing, Micheál ringing up Una Mulaney in the Irish Times every month and asking her what she thinks the party's direction and policy agenda should be for the next 6 months hasn't worked out for 5 years. Wakey, guys. Wakey. Party's going off the edge of a cliff. Leave, do something. No. You'll do, as Conor McGregor will say, you'll do absolutely nothing. So shut up. I'm just tired of it.
I completely understand. But come here, listen, we better move on and talk about something else. I was writing, I do this piece on Gript every week for subscribers called the Weekly Miscellany, where I kind of round up sort of events that took place during the week. And I have a line in it tomorrow that I was preparing for this podcast as I was writing it, and I saw this new music video, and I thought Sarah's going to want to talk about this video, and it's in the piece, and I've included it. It's called Days of Girlhood, and it's by Dylan Mulvaney, who is an American woman, who are
you trying to annoy me? Go on, you're trying to wind me up.
I am. I'm trying to wind you up. I'm trying to like just tighten the coil before I go. An American woman who most people might remember from her very successful sponsorship of Bud Light in America last year, where she appeared in an advert, and Bud Light's still trying to recover from it. A lot of people just stopped drinking it after she appeared in this advert. But anyway, she's one of these special new women, and this music video is all about what it's like to be a girl. What did you make of it? Was it reflective of your experience as a girl?
Well, John, this may shock you, but I've had a bit of a change of heart. So, the way in the podcast we've often said that we don't want to be cruel to anyone. I kind of want to be cruel today to someone.
Okay,
so
well, proceed with caution. I don't like cruelty, so let's not do what you did with the poor octopuses. So let's.
Yeah. No, I just think Dylan Mulvaney is an asshole, and we've discussed him a number of times before, and said I don't want to be cruel. He is somebody's child and all of that, but I think that the kind of me like holding back or trying to be kind doesn't actually do women any favors, and I think that this needs to be like called out for what it is. It's a song about days of girlhood. I must have missed my own girlhood because I'm not familiar with any of his descriptions of what days of girlhood entails. So, girlhood consists of, according to the song, not being able to get out of bed, being addicted to prescription pills, retail therapy, doing the walk of shame home after not remembering who the guy was that you slept with last night, overspending, flirting with guys to buy you drinks, listening to the Twilight soundtrack, and then having a mental breakdown in the bath. That's girlhood. And I'm just a bit fed up of everybody going along with this complete farce. For years, the people talk about the concept of blackface being wrong. Well, woman face is also wrong. And it used to be offensive to demean women by reducing them to kind of bimbo stereotypes and being only interested in shopping or whatever. And then there was a few years where, you saw women achieving in all kinds of different areas of life. And it felt like that kind of like, don't ask me, I'm just a girl kind of stupid thing was kind of gone. And now it's being brought back by a man in a dress, dancing around, reducing womanhood and girlhood to these kind of demeaning stereotypes. And I'm just not here for it. I think he is a bad guy. I think he is a misogynist. I think that he should be called out for what he is. I think he is disgraceful. It's a stupid song. It's not a, obviously there's no musical talent there, but there's no talent there, full stop. So that's not a shock. But I'm just fed up with it, and I'm not raising my daughter in a world where, skinny little twerp of a man dancing around in a skirt is considered progress. It's just not, and I'm not. I'm not going to call it out for anything. Like, I know you're saying she is a woman to try and annoy me, but he is a man. And he didn't even bother to change his name. Like, I don't know any women called Dylan, do you? So Dylan dancing around, writhing around on a bed in lingerie with other girls that is having a sleepover and drinking too much and shopping too much and taking too much prescription pills and then having a mental
Hold
breakdown.
on. Are you saying that writhing around in the bed in lingerie drinking is not what you do during a sleepover?
I didn't go to many sleepovers with other girls where we writhed around on the bed in our underwear. This is the stuff of male fantasy, John. I'm sorry, but it's not actually real life. And it just shows that this is a kind of an invention of a male mind. And he's just a weirdo who likes to dress up and then, reduce women to something that like some kind of thing that he can wear and make money out of. And I've had enough of it.
Well, I have to say, there's only one thing that you said that I disagree with, which is where you said there's no talent there. There is talent. There is the only talent that really matters in our current internet age, which is a real talent for getting attention. It's there. I mean, we're talking about him because he has been deliberately provocative. He knew exactly what he was doing when he did this. Everything down to I mean, it's a checklist of Barbie stereotypes. I watched it kind of like with sort of like, just astonishment that not at what he was saying, because it's nothing new. Every woman who's ever walked the earth will be familiar with some of the stereotypes, that you're a sex doll, that you're a bit daft and kind of like, need men to tell you what to do, that you that you kind of like you can't be trusted with money because you just buy all the shoes. Like you can't cope with your week, so you just retreat to the bath and soak for ages in bubbles and drink. And I'm surprised there wasn't a cat thrown in there as well. Like there's nothing new there. It's just that 5 years ago it would have been mortally offensive and a career ender for anyone to make that video about women. And now it's empowering. I mean, and that to me speaks to. It doesn't speak to anything so much as it speaks to the willingness of people to go along with the absurd rather than call it out. And most of those people are sort of. I remember seeing psychological profiles of people who are liberal, people who are conservative like us, and the main difference is that conservatives like you and me, this polling which is presented in the least flattering way to us, have a much lower tolerance for disgust. Basically, that if something disgusts us, we'll say it. Whereas as progressive people would find it unkind to voice that disgust. And I think that kind of bears out in relation to this. Because I don't believe
But that's a la carte disgust, though, John, because you and I both know that your point is right, that 5 years ago, somebody would have been career ending for them to do a video like this. But that's still true. If a male did a video, an American male singer, I can't even name one, did a video like this tomorrow featuring women, it would be career ending for them. Dylan Mulvaney is just part of a special protected class now that nobody calls out.
Do you remember a couple of years ago when, I can't remember the name of the band, but I do, because I'm a red-blooded male, remember the name of the model, Emily Ratajkowski, and I remember the name of the song, Blurred Lines. Do you remember the music video for Blurred Lines?
Yeah.
And I think the guy's name was Robin something, but he sang this song, and it was basically celebrating the sexual domination of women. And he had the girl in the video basically topless or mostly nude and writhing around like a sex doll. And there was outrage over the objectification and the portrayal of women as just like toys for men. And I have to say, we weren't doing this podcast at the time, but I would have agreed with that criticism. Like it was a fairly gross video, I think. Even though it became very popular in the culture, it was gross. But the feminists lined up to denounce it, and I'm not talking about I'm talking about the same kind of feminists who now say trans rights, were lining up to denounce it, and it's just amazing that they can't see what's happening here. And I would argue that video, like the blurred lines video, was at least, it was an overtly sort of sexual video. It was about kind of like, isn't she beautiful? Isn't she a sex object? The Mulvaney video was much worse, because that goes to the very essence of being a woman, being an idiot, essentially.
Yeah.
Because everyone has a sexual side. It's not the only aspect of them, but this isn't just saying a woman is just a sex object. This is saying a woman is an idiot who can't count her own money or cope with the events of the day.
Yeah. And who drinks too much and shops too much and is, takes prescription medication because like everything's, sad, and is promiscuous and doesn't even know the names of the people she's sleeping with or whatever. It's completely absurd. And, in the wider context as well of, the trans movement and we'll get to it in a minute, like puberty blockers for children being banned in the UK and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's like normalizing a kind of a trivialization of women and who women are and what it means to be a woman for an entire generation of young people, with in the backdrop of where they're told that if they want to be one, they can be one.
Yeah, it's and then we wonder why so many teenage girls, in particular, are saying, "I want to escape womanhood." I mean,
well, I don't blame them if that's what they think it is.
Exactly, that's the point I'm making. There's that on the one hand, you've got these middle-aged men becoming women, portraying womanhood as this, and then you've got a whole generation of teenage girls starting to flee womanhood and wish to escape it. Those two facts are connected in my mind. Anyway, let's talk about puberty blockers, because the UK government banned them this week. Banned is a strong term, but has declined to continue using them, which is just...
Well, yeah.
Oh? Is there a note of skepticism in your well yet?
No, I was just about to say, as going back to my point earlier on, that because I'm a better and bigger person, there was a number of people who I didn't text this week about some of these news items. People who called me transphobic because I said that a few years ago I asked questions about the Taoiseach clinic, and I was told by a couple of people that I know that I was... they said if one of my children told me they were trans, what would I do? And I'd said, well, the first thing I would do is get them to speak to a professional psychiatrist and psychologist, whatever. And they said that I was endorsing conversion therapy and whatever. And a bit like the other stuff, I've taken a load of shit from people for 10 years, and I was right. I was right on this. It was completely and utterly diabolical to be giving puberty blockers to children. It has massive, long-lasting effects on their health. And not just from the obvious things that you hear about in terms of their reproductive organs, but also bone development. Lots and lots of things are really, really important to your hormones in puberty, and messing with that will be the scandal of our lifetime. I'm not shocked that the HSE have come out and said that they're looking into it now. So at least just about around the time they'll probably get to it, we might have a children's hospital built. So it'll probably be about another 15 years from now.
Well, that's it. But, I mean, what's looking into it mean? I mean, because is it an urgent looking into, or is it a HSE review? Because a HSE review could take 7 years.
We're going to ring around the 47,000 NGOs that we pay $6 billion for to cover the trans rights movement, and ask them how they feel about it. And if one of them starts crying, we'll just leave it.
That's depressingly likely.
I know.
But I mean, there will be people listening to this show who kind of are almost a bit lost in terms of what we're talking about. So it's worth restating what puberty blockers are. Puberty blockers are drugs which essentially freeze the development of a child in puberty. So the hair on their chest doesn't grow. Their breasts don't develop if they're a woman. They don't start menstruating. The penis doesn't enlarge. all that sort of stuff is delayed. With the
And it's irreversible.
Yeah, but like, and it's irreversible, and it is intended to buy them time to consider what gender they actually wish to be, which is a lie, because no matter what they decide, they'll still be the gender they were born with, still be the biological sex they were born with. They will just have a body that is, undeveloped. It's, I mean, it's not unlike what Byzantine emperors used to do with little boys who had high voices, which is just to castrate them so their voice wouldn't break. I mean, it's the same thing, just with drugs, and for an ostensibly different reason.
But it's the children, and it was being done in that clinic in the UK, and we're seeing a slow but sure movement away from it by the medical profession, and quite rightly so. And Ireland is looking into it, but I still think, all in all, it is good news, and we should celebrate it, that, people are starting to wise up to this. And, now you'll have an influx of people who'll say, oh, well, I knew, no, you didn't, you said nothing. And I won't take lectures from anybody who sat around going that it was kind and that you're transphobic if you ask questions about mutilating children. They'll try it.
If I was ever to sit down and write a book about this era in Ireland, I would call it "Blinded by Compassion," because that's what we are. We're blinded in relation to all these issues that we've discussed on this show, from immigration to the kind of like let's delete mother from the Constitution, to Leo Varadkar and St. Patrick, to this awfulness. It's all people blinded by what they've been told is compassion. It's not, and never has been, kind to give a female child drugs to make sure that their breasts don't develop, or to give a male child drugs to make sure that his penis stays child-sized for the rest of time. That is not compassion. It's not medicine either. I mean, if you went back to the dawn of time in medicine and suggested this as a treatment to Hippocrates or any of the early doctors, they would have considered you a torturer, not a doctor.
But it's also agenda-driven very often in my observations, like by people who don't have children, or haven't spent a lot of time around children. Like children come up with all kinds of stuff. Is it compassionate if my child, one of my boys, or both of my boys, are obsessed with soccer? I mean, obsessed. They know every fact, every team, every player, everything. And a lot of soccer players have tattoos. Now, if my son comes to me and says that he desperately, desperately just really, really, really wants to have a tattoo on his face, is it compassionate for me to let him do that? Or should I wait for him to mutilate his own body until he's over 18?
Well, they're both Liverpool fans, and it's definitely not compassionate to let them put that.
That wasn't my fault. That wasn't my fault.
No, it wasn't.
But you get my point. Like, people who spend time around, any time at all around children, know that children come up with all kinds of things, and people can be confused about all kinds of things. And there's, like I've said this on the podcast before, that you very, very, very often see people with more than one trans child, and the statistical probability of you having more than one trans child is in the multi millions. I mean, it's just impossible. So the chances are more likely that you are filling your child's head full of crap, and then seeking the virtue signaling to all your peers about what an amazing parent you are by letting them be who they want to be. But I'd guarantee you, call back in 10 years, see how happy that situation turned out to be. If you have 3 trans children, there's something up.
Yep. No, endorsed. I have nothing to add to that. And I think we'll leave that topic there, because I wanted to talk a little bit about something I wrote about this week, which I think is really interesting because no one's talking about it. Nobody's watching the Late Late Show anymore, Sarah.
Well, I am so I've actually never. No, I lie. I turned it on for the toy show for my kids, right? And basically, the toy show starts at 9:30 or something mental, and my kids go to bed at 7:30, and they always eat all these sweets and then go mental, and then at about 9:45 fall asleep. Anyway, that is the only time I've ever turned it on.
It's bananas. I mean, I was looking this week at the viewership figure. So last Friday night, it got 381,000 viewers, which sounds like a lot on face value until you realise that's 7.5% of the Irish population. This is an institution that was once the dominant cultural institution in the country in the mid-80s, when Gay Byrne was putting condoms and bananas or whatever he was doing back in the midst of time. and half the country was watching. Nobody's watching this thing anymore. And I kind of think it's interesting to talk about because in the media, no one's really talking about it. There's a kind of polite turning of the eyes away. I think partially that is kind of, a well-intended kindness towards Patrick Keelty, who's taken the program over. But I mean,
Is it to do with Patrick Keelty, or what is it to do with?
Well, I think I don't watch it like you often enough. I see clips of it online, so all I can do is judge based on short clips. So I wanted to say with the proviso that my adjudication on Patrick Keelty may be unfair, but from what I've seen of him, I think the issue is that he's just exactly like Ryan Tubridy, and he feels like Tubridy light. Kind of feels like watching the B team, which is kind of a strange thing to say about Ryan Tubridy, but it like, and secondly, I think they're in this bubble where they I mean, if you go back through the Gay Bernie or the caliber of international guests they used to bring on, the likes of Laurence Olivier, for example, will be on the Late Late Show or whatever. And now it's just like Mary Robinson on once a year to talk about her work with the elders, Daniel and Magello O'Donnell on once a year. And it's the same. I mean, you can nearly predict the guests every year ahead of time. I mean, Hosier is on to talk about mental health. Jedward are on to talk about whatever Jed would talk about. Like it's just repetitive sort of trash. I think that's the single biggest problem, and I think that the second biggest problem is sort of like the team running its unwillingness to listen to criticism. I think they're kind of in this silo where they say, well, if you're criticizing the Late Late Show, you must not like it, but 300,000 people watch us every week and they like it, so we're going to keep doing what they're doing because we're loyal to our fans. I think there's an element of that. But people are, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think the Late Late Show producers had far too much power in Ireland for a very long time. But I just think it's interesting and it's symptomatic. This week has kind of felt for me like a sort of breaking point in the country. And I could be wrong, but you've had the referendums, you've got what's going on in Mount Street. Just today, Fintan O'Toole announced his retirement from the Irish Times. I really do wish him well. I've been on many's radio panel or television panel with Fintan O'Toole down through the years. He, whatever you think about him, and I rarely agree with him, he's an intelligent guy, a very nice guy in person, and he's been a formidable advocate for his intellectual position. But he is now stepping off the stage. And it just kind of feels a little bit like the dominant ideas that have grasped this country for as long as they have are finally starting to loosen their hold. And that's why I think the Late Late Show thing caught my attention as well, because it's been such a dominant institution and it's kind of withering on the vine.
I mean, I got more. So obviously we did this special episode last week about the referendum, and I went on a rant about the National Women's Council, which, I'm happy to do for anyone at any time. And I got more messages from people in the last week. People, particularly from Fianna Fáil, that I haven't, that I haven't heard from in 10 years. I had got more messages from people in Fianna Fáil that I used to know in the last week than I have in the combined previous 10 years. And it was all like, oh, I've been listening to the podcast for months and whatever. And I was like, these people wouldn't have admitted to listening to this podcast under torture 6 months ago. So now they're all of a sudden saying, oh, I listened to your podcast and it's great. And, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, so something's shifting. Like the worm is turning a little bit where people are getting a bit braver. And I think a referendum result that was like that has made people a bit more brave about being honest about what they really think.
There's an opinion poll in the Journal this evening which suggests that at the next election, which is the local and European elections, there are 33% of voters who are open to voting for, quote, a candidate with hardline anti-immigration views. Like that, I mean, because first of all, that's a loaded question. I don't think your views or mine are hardline. I don't think they're hardline in any way, shape, or form. Like
they were pretended, they pretended they were for years, but they're not at all. That's the gas thing.
Yeah, I mean, like my views on immigration are: immigration is good when we have space for people and they are making a net contribution to Irish society, and immigration is very bad when we don't have space for people and they're living in tents on Mount Street. I don't think that's a hardline anti-immigration view. I don't think that's a hardline view. I think it's bad for Ireland. I think like when we are closing down the D Hotel in Drogheda, stopping it as an ongoing business concern and instead using it as an emergency accommodation centre for people who we can't find any other space for, that's immigration is bad in that circumstance. When we joined the European, when we passed the Nice Treaty, and a load of people from Eastern Europe came here and started working and building lives for themselves, and now many people across this country will know in their schools the number of kids with Polish and Lithuanian, Latvian names, and the number of families that are proudly Irish, Eastern European. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I think there's an awful lot of positives to be gained there. I think it is entirely like anything else. You cut your cloth to fit your measure. Anyway, the Journal would almost certainly characterize these as hardline anti-immigration views. 33% of people would apparently vote for that, but I think it's probably greater, because I think when most people hear the phrase hardline anti-immigration views, they hear all foreigners out. I think that's what they think they're saying they're voting for. So the fact that 33% of people say they'll vote for a candidate with those views, I think, is a monumental shift in political attitudes, and I think it's probably greater than that. And whose
fault is that?
Well, it's yours and mine, obviously. Interestingly, the Journal had this thing in their poll where they polled media outlets, and Gript readers were the most likely to say they'd vote for a hardline anti-immigration candidate, possibly because they are aware that hardline anti-immigration views are as I have described them rather than as the Journal might describe them. That's just a thought. But
he knows you're stirring up racism, John. You know.
Yeah, but I was.
You're like the Pied Piper. You're like the Pied Piper of races. You just play a little tune and they all scurry out.
Yeah, well, Virgin Media are doing this documentary. I think I said earlier on in the episode, I was chatting to them for like literally an hour and a half in Nina this week. I sat down with Paul Quinn from Virgin Media, who's a lovely guy. And I was interviewed for this documentary, and I was kind of like, he was very fair in his questions. Now, who knows what, when you do an interview for an hour and a half, it's not going to be in that they're going to take the bits that they think are most interesting. So who knows how it'll come out? He could try and make me look terrible. I hope he won't. But he, we were just discussing this, and this idea that people across the country suddenly became like people in, I don't know, Picketown, Rosscray, were actually led by the far right. Like, is there any other circumstances in which people in this country would argue that people in Rosscray got angry because a few lads from Dublin landed down with Ireland for the Irish signs and told them to get angry? I mean, did they know how dubs are received in most of rural Ireland? So like, there's an awful lot of cope going on that it's everyone else's fault. It's nobody else's fault, lads. It's your own fault.
But this is the thing that keeps happening. This is why Gript exists. This is why people listen to this podcast. It's why they said after the referendum, they said, a lot of people, didn't understand. People don't understand that they're being racist now. People don't understand. Like, no, it's you. It's you. It's the media and the government not listening, trying to reframe what people are telling them to mean something that it doesn't. People weren't radicalising Rosscray. You and your policies made them angry.
It's like the old Jordan Peterson, Kathy Newman interview. So what you're really saying is, you tell these people that this is what I don't like. And then they turn around and go, so what you're really saying is you've got a problem with foreigners. Like, that's the tone. That's the tone. I don't know. We're not going to solve it this week. We didn't solve it last week, but we are here, as we always say, to let the rest of you know that you're not alone. That there are people out there who are thinking these things and trying to articulate them in a reasonable way. I got in trouble in a tweet I sent just this evening, by the way, where I said that in relation to that poll where 33% of people say they'll vote for an anti-immigration candidate, the public do want reasonableness as well. There's always a risk of overinterpreting the mood of the country and deciding that you can just go out and Yahoo your way to victory and send a few tweets and call the establishment traitors, say Ireland for the Irish, and you'll top the poll. No, you won't. You go and talk to people in a reasonable way about immigration. Say what they're thinking, which is it's gotten out of control, not insane things like we should deport every foreigner, which is what some people. I mean, first of all, somebody will take the hump at me for saying that's an insane thing. It's not practically possible. Not practically possible. So don't even bother arguing that. Instead, talk about the future. Anyway,
By the way, just in case, just do you have any views on where uh the Princess of Wales is?
I tried writing about this one during the week. I'm just astonished by the PR cock up. Like I don't understand. I don't
I'm not
understand. I don't understand why she can't record it like literally a 2-minute video and say thanks so much for all your support and care. I'm recovering. I look forward to being back on the royal whatever it is they do trail soon. Like, would that kill them? Instead, like, it's bizarre.
But then you see, this is the thing. Like, I'm the least conspiracy theorist person. And in the beginning, like, about a week ago, I was like, what fresh hell is this now that people are coming up with? You know what I mean? Because I see sometimes on Twitter it comes up, there's an entire movement of people that thinks that Meghan Markle's pregnancy was completely fake and that she wore like a fake prosthetic pregnancy bump and blah, 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 blah. Like, I think that's obviously comical. So I kind of put this into that kind of category about a week ago. But as time is going on, it's getting harder and harder to kind of, to your point, can someone just come out and say something? Because this is getting completely out of hand and people are really whipping themselves up into a frenzy here. And, their attentions could be better spent elsewhere. However, I said this to my husband and he's like, well, she's recovering from a surgery and she said she wasn't going to be appearing. So that's the end of that. And why should they pander to the chaos, which is, a fair point, but it just seems to have really gotten legs.
Well, I was trying to come up with a theory because even that, while Keith is correct, your husband is correct that yes, they said this and they have every right to stick to it and it's none of our business. And I agree with that. You also have to live in the real world, which is that it is an obvious question as to, her father-in-law, the king, is suffering from cancer and is being treated for cancer, and everyone knows he's been treated for cancer, and he's not doing public appearances, and he's not going on around to open things or to dob people on the neck with a sword or whatever he does. He is, but he did a video this weekend for some Commonwealth thingy that was on. And I saw it was because I'm a subscriber to the Daily Telegraph, and you never miss anything that happens with the royal family if you're a subscriber to the Daily Telegraph. It's like their big thing. And I saw that. I'm just like, he's actually got cancer. We know what he has, and yet he's doing this. So what's the story with the Princess of Wales? And my theory, for what it's worth, the only theory that I have that makes sense is that perhaps the surgery was something to do with her face. Like maybe she had to have an operation behind her eye. Maybe she got a massive scar down one side of her face, and maybe they want to hide that from the public until it's healed. That's my theory.
Well, but like, how are they going to long term? They would have to show the public that anyway. So why would they?
Well, that's my point. If it's true, if half her face was burned off, you're not going to hide that forever anyway.
Yeah.
But so that was my theory, because the only 2 times she's been photographed, one was in a car with her mother and she was wearing dark glasses, and the other one was in a car with her husband and her head was turned distinctly away from the cameras. And then the photograph was photoshopped. What could you do in Photoshop? You could fix somebody's face. That's my madcap theory, which is almost certainly wrong, but it's the only one that makes sense to me for why they're behaving the way they're behaving.
Well, I don't have a theory, but I will say this. In the last kind of 24 to 48 hours, I've begun to believe that something is afoot.
Well, I hope not. Because I have to say that I'll get in trouble for saying this. I think she's a real asset to the royal family. I think she'd be a very good queen. I think her husband is an altogether boring and dull fellow. I also think she's been, from what I can see from afar, she's been an admirable mother to her children. It must be very stressful to have kids knowing that from the day they're born they're going to be the most photographed children in the world. And I think she's been an admirable mother, kept them out of the public glare, except when it's appropriate for them not to be, in a very good way. So I hope there's nothing wrong with her. I confess myself a bit of a fan of the Princess of Wales, not in any kind of creepy way. I just think I've never seen anything about her to make me dislike her. I hope you're wrong. Anyway, on that royalist note, having lost about 500 subscribers for saying anything nice about the British royal family, we should probably leave it there for another week. You didn't say anything nice. You retain your Fianna Fáil opinion roots, so you're fine. So you can take it all out on me, folks, if you're annoyed at that. But until next week, Sarah and I are delighted that you joined us, and we will see you for another edition of The Week That Really Was. Until then, goodbye.